Thank you. Okay, so has this been a great day? Are we inspired? Is that enough? No, you're absolutely correct. If we're going to be catalyzed, now catalyze means what? It means to create or accelerate change. And so what we want to talk about today, and I think this is something that, I'm sort of reluctant because I'm so, hyped up on all these great speakers. I don't really want to do my talk now. Because my talk is why TED Talks don't change your life. And I don't say this because I'm just trying to be contrary. I'm really trying to make an important point. And the point is centered around the idea that we have this illusion that our conscious brain is in control. And so if I think something, I'll do it. And I want to spend some time going over about the last 200 million years of evolution. I've got 16 minutes left, so we'll cut to the chase here pretty quick. So how many of us drove here today? Okay, good. Now, how many of you were on your cell phone at some point during your trip? And how many of you, the only reason you weren't on your cell phone is because you couldn't find anybody to call that early? All right, now how can this be? How can we be essentially behind the wheel of a guided missile going 60, 70, maybe 80 miles per hour? We are mere seconds and one distracted driver away from a potentially lethal accident. And yet what we feel is boredom, right? We reach into our pocket, we pull out our phone, and we say, who can I call? Now, how many of you have had that creepy feeling of going 5 miles and not being able to remember the road you just drove over? Does this freak you out? All right, now I want you to realize that this is a great window in how your brain really works. And this is something that escapes us even though it's in front of us all the time, because we live in this illusion that we are consciously in control of what we do. But what I want to assure you is even though your conscious brain may pick the destination, it's your unconscious brain that's driving the car. Now, if we look at an image like this, I mean, how many of us are trying to lose weight? How many of us are on a diet? How many of us are trying to exercise, right? Why is it so hard? Right? Consciously you go, hey, I should be 10, 15, 20 pounds lighter. Hey, I should eat better. I should eat right. And if you're married, you hear this continuously, right? You should eat better. You should eat right. You should exercise more. And yet this picture rips apart all of our willpower. All of our conscious goals are gone. And so what I want us to do is to understand that if we want this time today to matter, it's not enough to be inspired. It's not enough to have good, happy thoughts. What we have to do is to understand really how our brains work. We need to understand that there's been a lot of work in neuroscience and cognitive psychology and social psychology that's given us a radical new picture of how the brain really works. And I want to spend some time with you today because I'm going to try real hard to convince you that if you want to make changes in your life, the trick is not convincing your conscious mind to do it. The trick is all about training your unconscious mind. So the brain, as far as we know, is the most complicated thing in the universe other than the universe. Now, this is not just human conceit. Inside the 1,500 cc carrying capacity of your skull, 100 billion neurons are crammed together. Each neuron is touching 10,000 other neurons. Every thought you have, everything you feel, every experience you have is a communication between those neurons. And even though it only weighs 3 pounds, your brain uses 20% of the energy of your body. Now, we're going to take a little bit of time and start looking at the brain through sort of the evolutionary lens. And we can kind of think about the brain being built over time. So when we go deeper into the brain, we're going back further in evolutionary history. So I want to start with the dinosaur brain. Now, the dinosaur brain, this part of our brain is called the dinosaur brain because it was around when dinosaurs were here. Dinosaurs had this kind of a structure that allowed them to do everything from autonomic functions, controlling all of their bodily processes, but also giving them the ability to control behavior to a degree that they dominated the planet for 160 million years. And the fact that this structure is present in our brains is testimony to its evolutionary utility. Now, what's important is, though this is critical not only to keeping you alive in terms of homeostasis and processing food and all the other kind of stuff, it's also incredibly important in controlling complex behaviors. But it's all happening outside of conscious awareness. You have no idea how this is going on. You cannot influence it by conscious thought. Now, I want to go to this next big evolutionary leap of the brain. And this is the limbic region, the structure deep inside your brain that was originally emerged with mammals. Now, I want to talk about 4 evolutionary powerful attributes that we get from the limbic region that really defeats everything we try to do consciously. All right? And the idea here is to not really, underestimate the power of your cognitive processes, which are fantastic for what they are. But it's to really respect how your brain actually evolved and the fact that this processing is what we rely on to stay alive. So inside the structure is the first thing we see really with the limbic region is this ability to remember things. So when neurons fire together, they wire together. It's through association that we make connections. But early mammals developed this structure called the hippocampus, which stores and retrieves memories in a way that's much more complex than the simple firing together that we get with just associations. So we can see how important that would be for early mammals. I mean, it'd be great to remember where food was plentiful and where danger was prevalent, right? And it's the same thing with us. Our memories are being stored. Now, we do have conscious memories, but most of our memories are being stored unconsciously and automatically. But what should be remembered, right? How do we decide what we're going to remember? And at the unconscious level, what decides what gets remembered is another little structure at the end of the hippocampus called the amygdala. Now, these names sound fancy. Hippocampus means seahorse. Amygdala means almond. It just sounds better if we use Greek terms for these things or Latin terms, right? So the amygdala is processing strong emotions. It's right at the end of the hippocampus, this little structure down at the bottom of this, in this yellow. And how many of us were trained when we were growing up that there is rational decisions and there is emotional decisions, right? Which one should you make? Right, so this is a lie. So this lie is based on the idea that you can make a decision without emotion. Emotion is what's telling you what's important. Without an emotional tag, you will not be remembered. If you don't make an emotional connection, you will not be remembered. This is why 9th grade history is a blur to me. My teacher was not good, and I don't remember most of that because there's no emotional connection. So this idea of memory and emotion are 2 huge evolutionary steps. Now again, we call it emotion. That's our term for it. But think about what it really is. Imagine a gazelle going to a water hole and surviving an attack, right? Every aspect of that experience is now part of the memory. So that gazelle is going to have a much higher likelihood of survival because the sights, the sounds, the location, all those things are encoded in its memory. And it will be able to respond faster as it goes forward. But memory and emotion come together to create this another great evolutionary leap, which is judgment. So our unconscious mind is continuously making judgments. All the time, right? And the way it works is it will make a judgment based on how little information is available. If you meet somebody for 3 seconds, you've already made a judgment about them. right? Now, if you have 5 minutes, you'll make another judgment. If you make it, know them for a few weeks, another judgment, right? But it's happening all the time, and your conscious mind doesn't know where these judgments are coming from. You have this instantaneous, a couple of seconds, and that's good, that's bad. I wrote a book, and I was dealing with my publisher, and they said that in the bookstore, a book has 3 seconds to make a connection. And when the publisher was taking this book to one of the European book fairs, she said that the professional book buyers will give her 20 seconds to make a sale. That's how long that they have to make up their mind whether or not they're going to carry the book. We're doing this all the time. Now, the fourth evolutionary leap from this part of the brain is habits. Now, habits are the area that I study. This is where I do most of my research and work. And habits are incredibly powerful because they allow us to do behaviors without having to consciously think about them. So if I've done something in the same situation multiple times and gotten good outcomes, I no longer have to think about it. So all of this stuff is happening unconsciously. And we have to understand this. If we want to make a change in our life, we're having to overcome this. We're having to overcome a brain that's always working. It's working effortlessly. It's making snap judgments, and it's processing millions of pieces of information at a time. Now, what we're dealing with then in this last evolutionary leap of the neocortex is the new brain. Now, it looks great. It's big. It took us from being nomadic, tribes foraging for existence to space explorers who have unraveled the mystery of the atom and the architecture of the universe, right? So it's very impressive. Don't get me wrong. I'm impressed by it. But it's slow and it's lazy and it's completely unreliable. So, and let's experience this. Now, this is an example of unconscious mental processing. Right? Now, before you recognize that there's a spider there, your unconscious mind was already processing that information. Your heart rate went up, you were getting a little bit nervous, you may have moved back a little bit. How many of us, when George showed us how much CO2 was in the room, started feeling like we couldn't breathe? Right? All of a sudden, like out of nowhere, all of a sudden you're kind of going, could somebody open the doors in the back and maybe... Right? Now, this is an example of conscious level processing. This hurts. Right? This takes more energy. This is slow. This is effortful. This will wear me out. So as we go forward, it's important for us to realize that if we want to actually catalyze what we've experienced today, we've got to do more than simply have these thoughts about, I ought to do that thing that person talked about. Okay, because if you don't change your behavior, you will not achieve these goals. So what I want to do is take the last few minutes and say, how many of us want to make a difference? How many of us want this experience to be catalyzed? All right, so we're going to spend some time doing just that. Pull out your TEDx booklets, find the speaker you found most inspiring, go to that page, and we're going to show you how to go through this process. Now, my area is habits. And so you'll see things like this, like context, cue, behavior, reinforce, these loops, right? Some people have it even simpler still. It's like cue, reinforcement, and routine or something, a reward routine. This is wrong. This shows a habit as a two-dimensional thing, right? I don't know if I've done this 10 times, 1,000 times. Habits are springs. Springs store energy. As you do a behavior more times, the habit becomes more strong, it becomes more reliable, it's more powerful, all right? So the idea of a habit spring is that when you compress a spring, it's storing energy in it. So when you're trying to change behavior with your will and your conscious mind, you're basically trying to hold the spring down. The spring's ready to fire, you're trying to hold it down. Your brain is lazy, your conscious brain is lazy, it's easily distracted, and it tires easily. So at some point, you're going to go, what? And the spring is just going to boom, right? So you start off saying, I want to eat right today, but then you get hungry, you get compressed with time, and the Snickers bar's right there, right? And then you've eaten it, and then you go, I'm a bad person. You're not bad. You're not weak-willed. You just got to understand how your brain's working. So what we want to do is to think through this process. So if in your change that you have identified. You need to change an existing behavior. What we have to understand is that discipline is the only way that you're going to be successful. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is your conscious brain training your unconscious brain. Your unconscious brain is powerful, it's reliable, right? Your brains are designed to work. These two brains, the minds come together. They're supposed to work together. They can work together great. But you got to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of them are, right? So discipline is how you take your conscious brain to make a goal, to train your unconscious brain to achieve. Your conscious brain can't do it. Trust me. I've tried this before myself. I was an alcohol and drug counselor for years, so this is where a lot of this stuff comes from. You're dealing with somebody has had alcohol, drug problems, and they know if they use again, they're going to lose their job, their family, they're going to go to jail. And they swear to you, and you know they believe it, I am not going to use again. Right? 2 weeks later, they're using again. And you go, are they crazy? Are they stupid? Are they weak? No. This is the power of the unconscious mind. We have to understand that. So the first thing is, to disrupt an old habit, is don't load the spring. So avoid the locations, the people, the time of day, whatever it is that says, I'm in this context. You've got to, and if you can't avoid that context, you've got to make sure that you're consciously aware that when you're in that situation, not to have your old behavior triggered. So the first thing is, like, if you're trying to lose weight, I use lose weight just because it's a placeholder for whatever it is you're trying to do. Then don't let yourself be hungry. Don't let yourself get tired. That just loads the spring. Eliminate the cue. Cues trigger the behavior automatically. Habits are so powerful because they don't require any conscious thought processes. The cue triggers it. So one of the key elements is to try to remove the cue. So if you're trying to be more productive, turn your phone off. Right? When you get interrupted, you lose about 12 minutes. It takes about 12 minutes to get back to where you were. So don't respond to emails. Don't respond to your phone if you want to be, if that's really your goal. You cannot. It's very hard to ignore that cue when it comes in, especially, in the younger generation with text messaging and all the things that seem to be grafted into their DNA now. Reframe the feedback. So your brain is always making these associations. Reframing the feedback, and the way I do this with, successfully was with my favorite ice cream, which was so rich and creamy. I converted the thought of that creamy texture to that's its high fat content. So whenever I would eat it, I would think about the fat instead of the wonderfulness of the flavor. Now, to create a new TED habit, first, translate the goal into behavior. Again, thoughts are weak, behaviors are strong. Establish a clear context. Make sure you have a time of day of the week, whatever, that you can execute the behavior consistently. Develop a reliable cue. And your electronics are great for this. A lot of us are wearing wearable electronics. We have cell phones, computers. A lot of these things can activate that behavior, can trigger that behavior if we repeat it consistently. Your alarm clock's a great example of that. It's a great cue to wake up. Create a powerful reinforcement. Make sure that your initial experience is successful. All right? You want to guarantee success in the early stages. Make sure that you build reinforcements into it. Make sure that you don't leave that up to chance, to just say, oh, well, if I work out, that's going to be the thing. If you work out too hard and your muscles are sore, you probably won't work out the next day. Guarantees the success of your early trial. And the last thing is repeat it until it feels normal. More importantly, repeat it until not doing it feels abnormal. Now, this is my passion because so much of what we're dealing with as a culture and a society is about habits. It's about things that we're not aware of consciously. So 2/3 of our healthcare costs are based on people's behavior. Last year, that was $1.8 trillion. Untold human misery, premature death. 100,000 people a year die from infections they get in hospitals. Again, completely avoidable deaths that are the consequence of behavior. The issue is not that we don't know what to do. We do. It's what we do that matters, not what we know. And so what I wanted to do today is to really give you the tools necessary to make this day not be just a great day, but to be the beginning of real changes in your life. So the key here at the end of the day is that your goal has to become a habit. And that's the end.